Well, we're now about a fortnight on from when I last trapped, or the first trapping session of 2023, and I'm back here at Lound Wood again this evening for at least an hour. The temperature is forecasted actually to rise by a couple of degrees as the night goes on, but as an effect of that, there's some light rain forecast. So I've come out for an hour, or maybe a couple of hours beforehand, to see what comes in. It's the 17th of February today, so I'll finish getting set up and we'll see what moths we can attract this evening. Much the standard fare, I would imagine, but you never know. It could always be that surprise. Well, the first moths are in, and quite typically Torticodes alternella, which I would expect, but the first macro is also another species that I always seem to get in first, and it's a chestnut. Chestnuts can often be found drinking sap or sat on the trunks of trees, especially in Sherwood Forest, where we used to see them sat on the trunks there, quite inactive. But when they come in at light, chestnuts are very distinctive, have an almost sort of common swift-like flight. If you've seen any of the swift moths arrive at light, with perhaps the exception of ghost moth or ghost swift, depending on what you want to call it, they fly like that, or they act pretty much the same, and then eventually they settle down, don't move for an hour or so, and then as the temperature drops, and they go off wandering, and they wander off the sheet and into the leaf litter. So two moths in already. The time's just approaching about 10 to 6, so we'll see what occurs. It is mild. There's another 2 Torticodes alternella descending down. That's 3 altogether, so we'll see what transpires for the next hour or so, and then see how long we stop, see what we get. And the first of probably numerous pale brindled beauties has just rolled in. Pale brindled beauties approach the light quite differently to many moths. In fact, they usually land well short of the ground sheet or near the light, often on the pathway, but it can be yards away, 10-20 yards away, and then they'll crawl and flutter across the ground and through the leaf litter until they eventually hit the ground sheet or the light. They tend not to flutter around the light much, and they play like this one's doing. It's an attractive moth, pale brindled beauty, quite variable. Some individuals are melanistic and virtually completely black and featureless, and others can be quite pale, almost like an olive ground coloration. But the lovely moths, males, have strongly feathered antennae, and they're quite a large moth as well. So that's the pale brindled beauty, the first of quite a few, I'm sure. Already got 3 chestnuts in now, we're just approaching 6, and a good half a dozen Torticodes alternella. Signs are promising. It is mild, there's a slight breeze that's predicted to drop as the evening goes on, and the temperature is forecasted to drop no lower than 9 as more Torticodes alternella ascend from the treetops. Now, the moth that's fluttering around the light at the bottom of the screen, that is a chestnut, and they're about the same size as a common swift and gold swift. And if this one doesn't settle down quickly, there it is. Look, that's very much how swifts react when approaching the light. It's just gone off the sheet now and it's going to secure itself down in the leaf litter. And there's another one comes in, another two comes in. One has gone to the light actually, while another one does that low flight on the ground sheet. It's always a giveaway to chestnuts. In the meantime, it's a small micro just dropping it. Well, the small micro is Stella. Not a sparkling moth, as you saw on the last video, or may have seen on the last video. So I'd best have a tot up of what we've got on the sheet. I do love these sort of mild February evenings. If you can, it's always worth your while taking the trap out to your nearest area of woodland where you can trap safely, and there you will certainly get more moths than if you trap at home. But unfortunately not everybody's able to do that, and they're not fortunate enough to be able to just chuck the stuff in their car and off they go. But nights like this you can get some really good numbers of moths. You might not get a good number of species, but we're doing well here so far. Less than half an hour trapping, and got plenty of chestnuts, just under 10 chestnuts. Good numbers, well into double figures of Tortricodes alternella. There's two Stella now that came in within a couple of minutes of each other. There's an Agonopteryx, probably Heracleana, could be Ciliella, but previous experience suggests that it's usually Agonopteryx Heracleana at Lound Wood in February, although both species do overwinter as adults. A couple of pale brindle beauties and a dotted border briefly. That's new to the year, so very promising early signs here. And what breeze there was seems to have dropped off completely now. There's no breeze whatsoever. And I thought I'd just show you this. This is Tortricodes alternella. Not the best of individuals looking at this, but quite typical. They're incredibly variable. You can get some which appear almost patternless and formless and dark. Then you can get others that are really sort of two-toned, which there's one or two in at the moment. But this is your typical Tortricodes alternella. We've just had the first spring usher just come in at the side. It's a very good night. There's good numbers of moths coming in. So this is Tortricodes alternella. It's one that if you trap early in the year, you need to learn, because you're going to see a lot of it if you visit and trap in any woodland. Now here's a trio of early spring moths. You've got Tortricodes alternella, which is slightly out of focus on the top right, and at the bottom you've got a chestnut, and the larger moth is a clouded drab, and I'll show you that a bit better. That's not long dropped in, and to be honest, I don't think I can remember having clouded drab before common Quaker. And now that's been disturbed, I'd best film it, hadn't I? Now clouded drab's a very variable moth. It's larger than small Quaker and common Quaker. Quite a robust species and quite variable. You can get some which are quite dull and drab, quite literally. And you can get others that are quite nicely marked, and some that are even differently coloured. It's a typical early spring species, but I usually find it comes later, a week or so later, than common quaker. Not that I've had common quaker tonight. That was a species that I was expecting, but species like quakers and other noctuids that fly early in the year, they feed, and so they tend not to appear at the light straight away, unlike chestnuts. And now this one's been in the lilac. This clouded drab is about to become active and go for a wander. And another moth that's just come in, or sneaked in, is March moth. And while I write those down, I need to tot up the totals of all the other species that are in. Lots of people often wonder, how can you tell what species of moth is flying in? And that's down to experience. And it's something that you do pick up. You might not believe it at first, but if you trap regular enough and over a number of years, you'll eventually start to pick it up, and you'll be able to know what something is as it's coming in. You'll certainly know when something's different. That's when you get excited and reach for the net. Just this time of year, pale brindle beauties are like pretty much nothing else here in Nottinghamshire anyway. Spring ushers coming daintier, they fly a lot sort of weaker. The one that's coming, I was going to film it, but it's that tattered. That's probably an indication of the state where we are with flight times in the year. It may well be that species like spring usher have pretty much done their thing, so to speak. I hope not, because the season barely seems to have got going. But the thing is, although you might not be getting many moths in your garden out here in the woodlands, Nottinghamshire and elsewhere in the UK, things are carrying on apace. And when we've had mild nights like we have, had a couple of cold spells, of course, but when those cold spells end, it's a free-for-all for those early flying species, and it's quite easy to miss species like spring usher. I know for many years, Dillis and I, when we were trapping here, we never had spring usher here, and it wasn't until a few years ago that we did get spring usher, or I got spring usher, and I get it every year since. It could well be that the moth moved into this area, but I doubt it. I think it's always been at Lound, but obviously at low density, and it wasn't as if I hadn't trapped during the early months of the year. That's something I've always done. And I remember my first experience with an MV light, and it was on this very spot, well, just a few yards away. It was more at the entrance to Lound, I'm just a bit in from the entrance tonight, and it was the first time I'd ever used an MV. Boy, was that an eye-opener. I couldn't believe how good an MV light was and how well moths were attracted to it. Before that, I'd been using a portable lantern with two small actinic tubes in, and that was a game changer for me in terms of moth trapping out and about. You can't beat an MV light. However, there are some moths, like your geometrids, your carpets and waves and things, that prefer to come and are more greatly attracted to an actinic light than they are one of these great big bright bulbs. But on the whole, if you get an MV bulb, use it, you'll catch far more moths. But if you're new to mothing, using an MV bulb straight away can make the whole prospect of identifying moths an extremely daunting one. You've been warned. And here's March moth, which you may well recognise. It's almost like an outsized Torticodes alternella. When Torticodes alternella first arrive at the light, they rest in this particular wing position and they have this same shape, but once they settle down, Torticodes alternella tend to wrap the wings around the body. And March moth is considerably larger, 2 or 3 times as large. Very common this time of year. It is an attractive moth, and that's not showed under this artificial light. Well, it's just approaching 7 o'clock, and although I've only been here an hour and a quarter, I'm quite happy with what I've caught. Temperatures dropped down to 8, which is lower than what I thought it would drop down to, but it doesn't feel that cold. But this in here is the star of the night, and it won't settle down, so I can't video it and film it for you on the sheet, so you'll have to make do with a photo. And this is a species which I'd hoped for. It's a long time since I've seen it. Not sure if we ever saw it, did it himself, whenever we trapped at Sherwood Forest. There may have been one record, but we had it a few times here at Lound and in the Eakring area, and it's Eclaris cristana, a beautiful Eclaris with a number of named varieties and forms. It's a truly beautiful micro moth. I remember this was before the days, or nights rather, of trapping with the use of an artificial light, and the only way I could record moths in the Eakring area was from the old car, and that was driving along the country lanes of Eakring, and whenever possible putting full beam on, and then every so often I would pull up and see what moths came across in front of the car or attracted to the car lights. But I remember one, I think it was a February night, fully enough, and there was ice on the road. There was a complete frost on everything, on all the foliage, and I'd come out to drive around Eakring, as I often used to do for owls, to try and get owls on the year list. And I was driving by Eakring Meadows, and this lone small tortrix fluttered into view in front of the car headlights. I promptly pulled the car up, got the net out, caught it, and it turned out to be my first ever Eclaris cristana. And it's a species which is, I've always had a soft spot for it. It's a cracking moth, and what I would do, I'd take this one home, photograph it, and then you can see just how nice Eclaris cristana can be. It overwinters as an adult, as does another but larger Eclaris, and that's Eclaris hastiana. But I like this diminutive Eclaris cristana. The other Eclaris that's coming is Eclaris ferragana. So, I know this is a short session, only an hour and a quarter, but it's well worth it. I've sampled the species that are around at the moment. I'm surprised at the lack of some species, but there are decent numbers of moths. I may well try somewhere else tomorrow night. You never know, you could be in for a surprise. So could I. So, it's home with this chap.